That was just to keep me on track because you guys would have talked forever. Alrighty. So we want to open the floor quickly just to hear any of your stories. Like, what I love about this summit that we're doing, conference, is it's relational. And we are here to explore and be open to God and what He's teaching us together. So I want to open the forum up and just give you an opportunity to share. If God's been speaking to you about something already, or even if in one of the workshops you've had a moment where God's revealed something, we'd love to hear it. And I invite Letitia up to share because she's just shared something with me, and I thought, that's awesome. Why don't you share it with the group? So.
Awesome. So the first session yesterday, I don't think that I can actually attest that this has ever happened to me before. But when I closed my eyes, I got a picture of me sitting on a squared couch, and Jesus was on the other side of the couch, and our eyes were intensely locked with one another. And I felt the words, there's no one else around. There's nowhere else I have to be. There's nowhere else you have to be. You're here with me. And the experience of that, the felt experience of that, was feeling a depth of love that I hadn't felt before from God to me, and saying, you're a priority, eyes on me. Keep your eyes on me. And so that was awesome. And yeah, my expectation of coming to the conference was, I loved the opportunity to share, but I was telling my husband before I got here that I'm most excited to come away and create the space to encounter God. That's something that's out of my routine, and I feel like I'm doing that more.
Thank you. So it's awesome. We want you guys to all have great encounters with God, but I just love it that, even our guest speakers are having great encounters with God. And to me, it's really, I celebrate the fact that, Letitia's words when she said, it's like, I've never had this happen to me before, that, I felt like me and Jesus were there visibly in the heavenly place, hanging out on God's couch. It's like amazing. So if you're having encounters like that, we're keen to celebrate them and share them with them. If you're feeling like God's downloading something or a prophetic word, this is a safe place to share it. Share it. We'll test it later, but we have to hear it first, to test it against the scriptures. So, we're not going to come down and say, that's not a word from God, and we'll go, that's interesting, thank you. And then so we'll move on. But we do want to, practice the spiritual gifts, hearing from the Lord and sharing with those, and sharing in a safe place in our community here where you can start to learn to hear from God yourself. So it's exciting, and I believe there's more of those moments that are going to come. One of our highlights from last year, and we're going to have something similar, is what we call a soaking night or a prayer night on Wednesday night. So we'll have one session where we have a teaching, but after that, we're actually just going to open up for you to spend some quality time with the Lord. When was the last time you just allowed God to speak to you for a half an hour or an hour? We'll celebrate communion as well together, but that'll be really special. So we're going to start off again with Tim. He shared some great stuff last night, and we're going to continue that session next. So why don't we just pray? Father, we just thank you. You're teaching us and opening our hearts, and I just pray we'll have ears to hear the deep revelation that you want to take us to. And as Cami has prayed, take us into that uncomfortable zone where we start to grow and learn and step into deeper revelation. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. I'll give you this one, and I'll fix the sound on it for you.
Thank you, Nathan. It's good to be back, and really appreciated the session we had just before. And I just want to reiterate something there, that when Cami talked about we're human beings, that's really important to grasp, that we're not just things or, immalleable people. I remember some years ago now where God challenged me, and I pastored churches and done that, and God challenged me with the whole preaching thing, and challenged me to think you're not just preaching to Christians, you're preaching to humans. And that was really revelationary to me, because then, just a practice for me, since that time, I started not doing the heavy study, but when I was putting messages together, I would do it in a coffee shop. Because I'd be thinking to myself, I wonder what this single mum who's over there having coffee thinks about what I just said. I wonder what this business person thinks about what I just said. I wonder what, and I have to think through my head about not just nice Christian language, but does this relate? Does this make a difference to people's lives? So that whole thing about that is important. My stream in this whole process is life coaching. That's a kind of a bit of a catch-all of what we're doing. And last night we talked about how important it was to have your self-centered, the Spirit of God dwelling within us, and your soul, as we talked again about this morning, your soul being moulded by God in His Spirit rather than moulded by stuff that happens to us. And so we talked about that. And today I want to talk about a model for mentoring and coaching that may be helpful to you. It's been helpful to me. It's a model. It's not the model. It's a model that helps me. And I want you to think of this. If you were helping someone else, this is maybe a model you would use. But not just that. Think about it for yourself even this morning as we look through it. And you'll find the notes for that on page 20. And it's simple notes, but I hope it makes sense as we go through. There is a difference. I spend most of my time now with leaders and pastors and heads of not-for-profits and stuff like that in a mentoring/coaching role, and they are slightly different. Mentoring, this is too simple to say, but mentoring is primarily about who you are, and coaching is about what you do. So it's a mixture. It's a mixture, but we have to get that who you are right first, because you can do all sorts of things out of cleverness and good intellect, but unless there's a heart within that's beating for the things of God, it may be very difficult to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and we'll have some questions and answers, and hopefully we'll have some questions. Whether you get the answers or not is another story, but we'll have some time for that. And so for me, a model, as I said, it's a model, and it's in two places. You'll see it just in words, but then I'll come to the diagram, how it all fits together, a little bit later on in that space. But I think there are 5 windows into someone's inner health. And the first one is that window of spirituality. It's the central one. It's our relationship with God. That's the center one. Where is that at? How is that functioning? So when I'm talking with someone, I would try to say to them, look, tell me some of the rhythms you've got in your life. Tell me some of those rhythms you've put together to help you in this relationship business with God. How do you form and reform and be informed and transformed in your relationship with God? What are some of the rhythms you've put in your life? And it's really important to explore that, because we do need those rhythms. I want to say this, don't be over-prescriptive. Sometimes people get really prescriptive about rhythms. You must have a quiet time at 6:15 every morning, and it's got to go for an hour and a half. Don't do that. Don't do that. It may not work for you. Your best time may be 10:30 at night. Now, it's probably unlikely, but it could be. But don't be too prescriptive about what those rhythms look like, but find them and explore them. We need to do that. So what is your rhythm of prayer? How does it work? I'll try and find that out with someone. What is your rhythm of scripture? What is your rhythm in silence? What is your rhythm in celebration? Some of those spiritual practices that are really important. I'll try and find out people's rhythm and how they help them in their relationship with God. Because if they don't help you, don't do them. When I first got saved way back in 1972, 74 I should say, got married in 72, saved in 74. When I got saved, people kept telling me all the things I should do. You should do this, you should, and I'd get there and I'd go, oh, it doesn't work really. That doesn't jig for me. It doesn't work for me. Or sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You've just got to explore rhythms that help you in your relationship with Jesus and not feel guilty because you're exploring that. Sometimes we're made to feel very guilty if we haven't had the same experience or they haven't done the same rhythm that somebody else has done, and that can be tricky for us. And because character is about building the rhythms in our lives. the rhythms that relate us to Jesus, how we function really well in our relationship with Jesus. And I got to say to you, we've got to be all the time reviewing them and refreshing them, because rhythms can get really stale really easily. And they have to be reviewed sometimes because the circumstances of life. If you're a young mum with a couple of small kids, you're not going to get up at 6:30 every morning and be free in time to do an hour with God on your own. You're just not going to be able to do that. Don't feel bad about that. So that's not a bad thing to think. You've got to review them all the time. Sometimes circumstances of life change. Sometimes you just know you're getting stale. And you know it. You feel it. I'll give you a couple of illustrations personally. I discovered through a tragedy in my own family that after that tragedy I struggled to pray, to be honest, for a while. And how did I get back to that? I found it easier then to pray when I walked. So I find it easier now to pray when I walk than I do when I sit. You can still pray when you're sitting, but for me, as I walk, I find it easier. That rhythm allows me. It's called habit stacking. So on a habit you have of walking, you stack another habit which brings you closer to Jesus. And that's just a healthy thing for me. I found that really, really helpful to discover that that's how it works for me. Now, for other people, I know people who can sit in a room, in a chair, in a corner, and pray for hours and bless them. That's great. For me, I'd be better to walk for an hour or 20 minutes or whatever it might be to do that. I found recently, we've just moved house recently, and we're on a smaller house. We've downsized and we've upsized our land. So I just found my scripture reading getting a bit rote. You just read it, and churches will have sometimes this read through the Bible in a year thing. That's never quite worked fully for me. I don't know why. Because I like to go back to the same passage and go, what does that really say? What does that really say? And I find that, the rest of the church is in Deuteronomy 4 and I'm back in Genesis 3, and it's about 3 months down the track. That's just the way it's worked for me. So it was getting a bit rote, and so in this new place, I've just found a new rhythm in the last 2 months. I go out the back because there's no one around. I've got 3 acres, and I go out the back and I actually read scripture out loud. And I found just reading it out loud has made a difference to me in my own spirit. So you've got to review your rhythms. One more I'll tell you about personally that I found really helpful, and it's only just recently this. So you're never too old to review your rhythms. Don't get into a routine. You're never too old. I'm 70, and I had to renew my worship rhythms. So I found myself, and I hate to say this, but I found myself in work. I love to be in worship and pray and sing, but I found myself, I wasn't present in the presence of God. So we're in the presence of God, but I wasn't present. I'm thinking about what I'm doing next. I'm thinking about I've got to get up to preach. I'm thinking about all sorts, and I actually wasn't present in the presence of God. And one little thing, and this is for me, this may not be for you. I haven't done it here, so forgive me for that, but I found that when I come to worship, I take my shoes off now. Just to remind me I'm barefooted and I need to be present in the presence of God. It's just a rhythm for me. So we've got to be reviewing rhythms all the time. So when you're talking to people who you might be mentoring or coaching, you don't just want to ask what sort of rhythms people are in, but are they fresh? Are they being fresh in their? Are you being fresh? Do you need to review some of the rhythms that are in your life that have just become a little stale, or that circumstances have meant you can't do them as frequently or as passionately as you used to? So that's really an important thing to understand. So sometimes just habit stacking is a really helpful thing. What do you really love to do? And stack something on top of that really helps you in that process. Now, you don't have to do it all the time. You don't have to think every time I walk I pray. I don't do that, but it helps me. It just helps me. So work out the rhythms that will help you in that spirituality place, which is the relationship you have with God, which is the foremost and most important part of someone's being. So that's important. That's the first and most significant window into someone's inner health and well-being. Really important. The second thing is relationships. Key relationships, I'm talking primarily there. Apart from your relationship with God, relationships with others are the most powerful influence in your life. The most powerful influence. How you connect with those. And by key relationships, I'm talking about family. I'm talking about, if you're in ministry somewhere, a team. I'm talking about the church. Talking about the community. Your relationships are really crucial, but particularly those key relationships that are really, really important. How are they going? It's like concentric circles. There's God, and then there's your family. If you have a spouse or a partner, then there's kids and team and stuff. But how are those key relationships doing? I want to ask people those questions. How's it going with others? Because you can say, and I've heard people say this, oh, me and God are doing terrific, but no one loves me, no one likes me. I just get up other people's nose, and it's kind of doesn't fit too well. One of the questions that is tricky when you come back to your relationship with God, sometimes ask God the same questions that you would think of someone else. So a question. This is going to sound like a weird question to ask, but do I like God? Not do I love God, because you'll all say yes. And does God like me? Not does God love you, because you'll all say yes. But does God like me? That's a very different question. Do you think God likes me? Because you've got to come to the fact that he does. He actually likes you enough to have died for you. And do you like him? Or do you just love him because Christians should love him? Or do you actually like him? So those questions, and we need to ask questions about relationships with others as well. And if there are relationships that are a little estranged and a little out of kilter, we need to address that and be honest about that and build those relationships, because it's your most important influence apart from your relationship with God. The most important influence in your life are relationship with others. And there is too many of those which are broken. In not well. The third one, I'm not going to touch on this very much because Cammie's going to look at this a bit more, but it's the whole emotional. How are you emotionally? What's your emotional well-being? What are the things in life that drain you, and what are the things in life that fill you up? And some of them can seem not brilliantly spiritual, but they just drain you, and sometimes they don't seem very spiritual, but they fill you up. They just somehow it fills your emotional tank. Think about your tank as got, a spigot on the top, or a pipe on the top, and a spigot on the bottom, and it gets drained. People can drain your emotional tank. Some people are real people, and some people aren't. And they just need time on their own. Too many people and they're unpeopled, you know what I mean? And that's what happens. It can drain. And working out in your own mind what drains you and what fills you up is really important. And don't feel you have to fit into a particular mold for that to happen. That's important to understand that. Personally, it's funny things that feel. I love movies. Anybody like movies? I'm one of those pathetic creatures who's happy to go to the movies on his own. You know the way when you're sitting in the movies and somebody comes in on your own, you go, oh no, poor character. He's got no one to go to the movies with. It's not that I don't have anyone to go to the movies with, but my wife and I like different movies. I'm sort of, Die Hard and Born Identity and stuff like that, and Chris is more Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. That doesn't fill me up at all. So we just got to work that out. But I can go to a movie for a couple of hours, sit there, watch it, and go out and feel great. You've got to work out what builds your emotional tank and what drains your emotional tank. And you've got to be prepared to put the boundaries in place that will help you in that process. So when you are so that's for you too, but when you're mentoring other people, you need to discover how people's emotional tank. One of the questions I ask people when I meet with them is this: on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you can't get out of bed in the morning, and 10 being you just jump out of bed, you're excited to get back into life and work and faith. On a scale of 1 to 10, where is your emotional, how are you feeling emotionally right now? You know the average answer for pastors? 5.5. 5.5. And which is just tough, and that was before COVID. So it could be less now. So it's just that we need to give people the opportunity to regroup, to re-envision, to recharge, and to give people the time and the space and the allowance to, and yourself, to recharge your emotional tank. Because 5.5 will not do you well for 20 years. If you're 20, 25 years at 5.5, you'll just gradually, it'll be death by 1,000 cuts. That's what it will be for you. But that emotional well-being is really, really important as to how do you fill your tank. The fourth one there is the created rhythms of life. And by that I mean things like sleep, rest, nutrition, exercise, relaxation, fun. How are we going in those spaces? In those spaces of life? Because the created rhythms of life are all about sustainability. How do we get through ministry, life, family, being? How do we get through those places healthily and well? And you have to be able to do that with the rhythms that God has given you to look after. And you cannot expect to break those, if you like, life journey rules continually and end up healthy. And you'll find people say things like, I'd rather rust out than burn out, or I'd rather burn out than rust out rather. And no, that's nonsense. You don't want to rust out. You don't want to burn out. You want just a good rhythm of life that gets you through and gets you through to a really healthy place. It's all about sustainability and in that space. And you got, if you're mentoring someone, you've got to make sure that they're sustaining themselves for life's journey and not killing themselves. And the last area is vulnerabilities. So the question I would ask pastors particularly is, what would take you out of ministry? If the devil had a plan, how would he plan to take you out of ministry? I mean, what are your vulnerabilities? And we tend to think of, money, sex, power, and they are crucial. But the biggest vulnerability for leaders now, and you're all leaders, we heard that this morning, we're all leaders. The biggest vulnerability now, and it's not that those aren't important, the biggest vulnerability about leaders now is discouragement. People are feeling discouragement. In the last 3 years, 70% of leaders have thought about quitting. 70%. No, they haven't done it. Some have, not 70%, but have thought about quitting because I'm discouraged. I'm just discouraged. And you're all in that space. Maybe you lead a small group, or you lead a ministry, or you lead something, and it's easy to get discouraged. And I'll tell you why in Christendom and our faith, because there's often a lag between truth and action. There's often that lag. You preach a sermon and it's a beauty, you think it's fantastic, and nothing really happens out of it. Not just on the day, but maybe 6 months later someone will say to you, you remember you said that? Well, it's really impacted me. And you go, oh, I wish I'd have known that at the time, because I felt discouraged for 6 months. I reckon every pastor has an alternative occupation. That if you weren't a pastor, you'd be doing this. Mine is, I'd be a mailman. And it's because, I thought about it why. Now they've got those little bikes that you ride around with little hoods on. They're pretty neat. It's because you can go out in the morning, sort your mail, have it all delivered by the end of the day, and you're finished. And you've brought joy to some people because they've got their mail on the day they expected it. Whereas sometimes in Christian leadership, that doesn't happen. You do your thing and you can't see the results of it for a while. And that can drain you. It's like I said, it's a little like death by 1,000 cuts. You don't see it coming, but it just comes. So that whole area of vulnerability, what would take you out, and we often think of those biggies, sex, power and money, and they're big, and they are, and we see some of that around about us at the moment, but it's even more than that. You want to make sure that the people you are mentoring, including yourself, are getting encouraged. They are the most important things that matter to people. So that's crucial. And if you look at the diagram, that's to me how it all fits together. I want to talk to you in a moment about the key qualities of mentors, and we'll come and what I think some of those are. But that diagram is crucial. So you've got your relationship with God at the middle, right in the middle, that's the central. But all of those other things are connected with that and connected with each other. You are whole beings. And all of those things are connected together. Now that's a model that I use. I pastor and mentor a number of leaders. I find that very helpful. But that's just the mentoring one. And then you can get into the place of saying, now, what's on your mind in terms of the challenges you have at work or the challenges you have around the place? So, but I want to make sure that people are coming at those from a healthy being, a healthy place. Does that make sense? So that's important that we start to get, and for me, they are 5 key windows into your inner health. Your inner health, and then we can talk about what you do. Now, it's not that simple. You don't go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, you may, but you have to ascertain what's key at the moment. Now, it depends. If you are only meeting someone, say, once a quarter, then you do need to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you're meeting regularly, if you're meeting with someone monthly or even fortnightly, you can afford not to have to do those every time. And you actually listen to what the person's saying. How are you going? I'm having trouble with my oldest son. That's where you start. You don't go, well, tell me about the rhythms you got in your spirituality first. No, that's what's on that person's mind. You start there. You might go back there afterwards, but it's not a just sort of linear progression. You come at it wherever the person is at to start with. And if there's nothing presenting, okay, then you work out a bit of a routine. But there could be something that's presenting up front. And if it's whatever's presenting, it's on that person's mind. Remember, that's their soul. You want to give some sort of clarity to that and allow that person to start some healing process for that thing. Or else you could be talking about everything else and they've still got that on their mind, because you're not addressing it. So you have to start where, or somebody's had some sort of addiction or some sort of problem with some area. You might have to start with the vulnerability. How have you been this month with that? You've got to start where the person's at. Okay, so those 5 things form for me, it's a model. It's not the model. It's not perfect. But it just helps me understand how do I get to a place with someone where I'm actually going to be adding value to their life. Not just am I going through some sort of, rigmarole or routine. How am I going to get some value in someone's life? So I'm going to stop there for a minute. Any questions, comments, abuse, any of that? Those 5. Are there others that you think is missed? And I've rushed through pretty quickly. On this whole breath.
I'll ask a question, Tim. When you're coaching someone in relationships, everything sort of often comes to be relational. But it seems like most of the issues that we have are usually with other people, if it's not ourselves. But, how would you coach someone to, deal with some of the relational issues that they may be facing? Sure. For example, the son, or if you've got a colleague at work that's really bothering, how would you then help that person to overcome that relational challenge?
It's a tricky one. Those key relationships people have is a tricky one because you are not a counsellor. You're a mentor. You're trying to help them. So if it's deep counseling they need, or don't assume responsibilities that you're not equipped to handle, because that's more unhelpful than anything. So if someone's having an issue with them, it's a kind of something that you think has some sort of some way you can help or point them in the right direction, go right ahead. But don't try and be the solver of every problem, because that'll be disastrous in the end. And I'll tell you a story, and it's a kind of a related story. There was a issue down in one of the churches near where I live, where a woman whose husband had died, and the pastor came around to see her, and she was asking him questions about, what she should do now with the house and, with all the things that she had. And he advised her to sell her house. He said, you should sell your house. And she did. And it was a disaster. And eventually she realized that she got some other advice. It was a disaster. And she sued him and the church. Now, she didn't win, and I'll tell you why she didn't win, because the law said you should never have taken that advice from somebody who wasn't trying to do it. But the carnage that cost to that, because somebody overstepped their mark. So if someone's got a relational issue that's bigger than just, some suggestion or some, bit of direction to give, relate them somewhere else. Tell them to go somewhere else, because you're not their counselor, but you're their mentor, and that's it's a different thing to be. And it's tricky, because you want to help, and those of us in leadership, we want to fix things. We want to get someone fixed as soon as we can. So we've just got to be really careful about that. But if you can help point the way. The other thing is, what people discover for themselves is far more powerful than what you tell them. So if you can ask the right questions to draw out, might it help to do that? Would it, rather than, I would do this or you should do that. What have you thought of this? Help me understand that. So I hope that helps. So give someone help, encouragement and support, but if it's not in your wheelhouse, don't do it.
Would you say that, just to clarify exactly what you said there, which is, I guess, going to be my next question, are you leading people, the role isn't necessarily to give them answers, but to ask questions for them to discover answers themselves?
Absolutely. That's it. Ask the questions, and that's why a good mentor will be a good question asker. Ask the questions that will draw it out of the person. Have you thought of, no, I haven't thought of that. Well, would that be an option for you to look at further? Can we talk about that again in a month's time and see how you've gone? That sort of thing. So there's an accountability there to the question, but you're not telling them what to do. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions, comments on any of those inner health things? Great, that's good. So the question was, on your own particularly, it's hard to cope. And where do you go to get some sort of balance or clarity or whatever in life? And how do you do that? So to project that, how do young people find themselves on their own, able to cope? I think that's one of the values of something called the church, and people around about you, that there needs to be people around us, even if we wouldn't call them mentors. We can have. I have a co-mentorship relationship with an older man, who I've known for years, and we would say we're co-mentors with each other. So we can be co-mentors. We can say, "What do you think about that?" I've been puzzling over that, because the difficulty with isolation is that you can become very isolated, and you just see the answer in your own mind, and we need other people just to bounce stuff off. And so I think it's about bouncing things off with people, and that's really important. So it is hard to cope when there's no, but yeah, and having some clear purposes around about is important. One of the things, it's in the last few years, one of the things that we've seen is uncertainty. And we can't even look to the future with certainty. And you can't give people too much certainty. But when in the absence of certainty, the next best thing is clarity. And if you can give people some clarity, even if you can't give them uncertainty, I can't tell you what's going to be like, but here's the steps I think you need to take to start to find those, or here's the purpose you've got. So clarity is the second best thing when you can't have certainty. So I think we need to help young people cope really well, because it's an epidemic. It's an epidemic. Any other? Enoch.
Have you got some advice maybe for some people that don't have a mentor, and having that safe place that you can talk things through with people, but there's also people that aren't appropriate to talk to? Can you give some boundaries around that?
I'm going to talk about what makes a good mentor in a minute, but I would say that the key thing about mentoring is that you choose your mentor, not that your mentor chooses you. You don't impose a mentor on somebody who might be inappropriate. So you need to be somebody who you have observed their life, you've observed something of their wisdom, you've observed how they relate to people, and that's the person I'm going to ask if they would be open to mentor me. When you impose a mentor, or when you go along as a mentor and say to someone, I think I should mentor you, that's the worst thing you can do, because you're imposing that a person. And if you're a senior person, the person has got feels obliged to say yes, but inside might be going, oh no. So I think you have to look yourself at the mentor and say, I'd be really happy for that person to mentor me, and to I could bring my life to, I could open up to. But it's really the mentoree choosing the mentor. I think that's crucial, really important. Imposed mentorship, and that's why you see sometimes, and it's a long bow to draw, but you see sometimes in cults, we've decided who your mentor is, and you can't do this unless you get a permission from so-and-so. No. You've got to choose that. That's the healthiest place. And I would always say to people, if it's not working for you, let me know. And we'll, find someone else. Or I'll help you find someone else. But you choose. Does that make sense? Is there anything more on that?
I think I've observed that some people are seeing people in their life as maybe they're a close friend, so they become their mentor by default because they're safe. That's a safe place for them. But actually what they're sharing with that person is they shouldn't be sharing that with them, because they don't have the ability to hold that, or maybe it's confidential, and then that creates a problem, particularly in a church type of context. So
Really important. And look, I would say one of the things I'll say in a moment is the whole issue of confidentiality and safety is crucial. I would always say to someone the first time I met with them, you need to know that what you say to me stays with me unless it's a reportable offence. And there are some of those. And you have to report them. But they're quite few and far between. What you say to me stays with me. And I say to people, it'll stay in the vault. There's a vault there. I will go to my grave, the only person knowing what you tell me, unless you tell someone else. So, and that's important for mentoring. Really crucial. And you'll find that it's funny how God over time allows you to care deeply for that person, but not wear the burden of what they've shared with you. Initially, you go, oh my goodness, so-and-so's just about to, quit his job or whatever, or, the family's in upheaval. After a while, you can be very gracious and godly to that person, and God gives you the grace to not wear everything you've heard as a heavy weight on you. So, but I would say make sure you feel very safe with someone before you would go near them to ask them to be a mentor.
Is there a time when a mentor should step back? I remember I mentored a young woman and she had loads of drugs and problems and she was still on drugs and this and that. And I worked with her for a year, but I found that she was not progressing, and that she was relying on me to fill her problems and to be the one to solve all her problems. And I stepped back and I felt, oh God, I felt so much guilt.
Yeah. Question is there a time? Is there a time for? And should you end a mentoring relationship? I would always have it for a natural review process. So I would say to someone, let's give this a go for 3 months, see how we go, and then we'll take it on for a year. At the end of the year, we'll review it. I always want people to have an out, so they don't feel like they're attached to me forever and a day, and I don't want to be attached to them forever and a day. And if I've sensed that someone's just meeting with me because they get some sort of fun and jollies out of telling me their problems, but they're not willing to work on them, I'll back off and say, look, it's not helpful, and I can do that without guilt. But it takes a bit of time, because you do feel guilty if you feel like you're abandoning someone. Yeah, I know. We should help everybody. There's some people you can't help, and so you can do that without guilt. But I would always have review processes built in. So let's give this a go for 3 months. Yeah. 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 Sure. Feel guilty? I know. Don't. So I just have let's do this for 3 months. First time someone wants to ask me, I say, well, let's have a coffee. You just tell me your story a bit. Look, let's do this for 3 months. If it's helpful to you, let's keep it going. But we'll always review. At the end of every year, I'll review every relationship I have in that place, so that people feel free. And I want to say, don't feel guilty about saying it's worked so far, but it's not going to work in the future. I'm okay with that. Yeah. If someone came to me, because I'd expect someone to come to me. I don't go chasing people to mentor. So if they came to me, I'd say, let's have a coffee. I'll do that with anybody, basically. I like coffee. And so I'd say, let's sit together. Because I think everybody should have a mentor, I'm more in that space than questioning. I'm more yes than no, but I want to go and say, look, you give this some thought for next week, and I will too. And I probably will look at it more like, unless God gives me a no, or sometimes it's just not going to fit. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed with. I've got too much happening. I can't do it. If I can't give adequate time to that person, I want to see that person flourish, and I can't do that, I'll say no. But by and large, if I am able to do it, I'll be looking for God to say no rather than for God to say yes. Does that make sense? Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just tell me the worst thing that's ever happened to you and how you're shattered in life and I'll help you. No, it's people. Everyone needs a mentor, I think, to help you with life. It's not. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to. Yes. You take the mic. Cause...
Like not a question, but I think it's probably something like I've experienced is that when, I mentor someone and that person wants to hear what that pleases the moment or the comfort that is in or she's in. But if you, I give her guidelines of maybe try to change the way you do stuff, or maybe you can do things differently. they walk away, and they won't take that one in as something for them to try, because they feel like intrude, or they feel like, discomfort in there. So I don't know, how do we go with the next step?
One of the things you've got, that's why I said we've got to start with the security we have. Because if somebody rejects your advice, sometimes we interpret that to they rejecting me. No. I've given you some thoughts. You reject those, your free will. God created you with that. You got free will. I might think that's not going to take you very far, but I'm going to absolve myself from wearing that, or else we get this thing called codependency, where someone becomes, you can, as a mentor, you get dependent on people doing what you say, which is very unhealthy. That you only feel good about yourself if somebody agrees with you and does what you say, and if they don't, you take it personally. Now, you've got to be pretty secure in yourself to go, if they don't take it personally, if I'm giving them suggestions, and I'm not advising them in that sense, I'm giving them some thought processes. If they come to a different process, that's their business. I'm not be all and end all for them, and it's really important to understand that. It's particularly some of the giving questions is one of the best statements you'll ever make to people. 3 little words: help me understand. Not why do you do that, but help me understand. Help me understand how you come to that conclusion. Important.
Tim, could you perhaps comment, are there, for example, coaching a son or daughter or a close relation, even a spouse, for example, how you would approach that differently to perhaps any other mentoring relationship?
I wouldn't be a mentor for my wife. I mean, you mentor each other in a sense, but in a formal way, I wouldn't mentor my wife, and I wouldn't be mentored by my wife. Just because the temptation is to advise. You should. You idiot! Why did you? No, I wouldn't say that. Well, why did you do that? So never call your wife an idiot. That's a very bad thing to do. But you know what I mean? So I wouldn't do it. And with a child, well, you're giving advice to your kids all the time, but I would want them to choose a wise mentor person external to me, who can give it. But I'd be very keen to know who they are. You know what I mean? Like I might give them advice as to what sort of person they should look for. Or have you thought of Joe Bloggs, who would be a great mentor for you, who would be able to build into your life? Have you thought of him or her, whatever it might be? So, but I would personally, I'd avoid being any more to my kids than their dad, and that's a big thing, or any more to my wife than her husband. I wouldn't want to be a mentor to coaching. May be a little different. If your son's taking on the business that you've got, you could coach him in that process, but to be his or her spiritual mentor as a parent, I would avoid personally. So let me tell you about what I think are some of the key qualities of mentors. This is not down on your page, so I'm just going to, extra. You want to pick someone who's been an experienced leader over a period of time. Someone who's led well, not for centuries, but certainly has got some experience and runs on the board in terms of their own life's experience. That would be important. You want to pick someone who's got a faith that's intimate and organic, so that they have a really close relationship with God, and it's organic. They're sort of growing with it in it as it comes. They're not stiff and starchy. They're not this is the only way I do things. They're a bit organic with God and and very intimate with God. So you want to find someone who's that, and you want to be that sort of person. If you're a mentor, you want to be a really good listener. You want to listen well. And you want to ask good questions. Because it's about drawing out. It's not about, giving your, 10 best, points of theology or whatever. It's about drawing out some. So you want to be a good listener. And don't jump into blank spaces. Don't be afraid of silence. If you've asked a question and someone's struggling with it, let them sit with that for a while. Because the temptation will be to rescue silence. That's always the temptation. Don't do that. A good mentor would need to have a passion for the well-being of others. You've got to want the best for others. It's not just a job or something that's a responsibility of a mature Christian. You've got to have a passion for people and for that particular person. You want to be a good encourager, but not a flatterer. So you want to encourage, which means put courage in, but not a flatterer. That was fantastic. Everything's fantastic. Everything's wonderful. Everything, you're the best, things than sliced bread. No, you're not. But be an encourager, but don't flatter. That's important. You need to choose. You need to have. If you're going to mentor people, you probably need to have a mentoring model that's working in your own life first. It doesn't have to look any particular. It doesn't have to look like that, but you need to have somebody who's building into your own life. Some years ago now, a guy with the name of Bobby Clinton, not Bill Clinton, Bobby Clinton wrote a book on leadership. And he surveyed, I think it was 3,000 or 4,000 pastors who'd finished their journey, who had come to the end of their pastoring and finished well, And he wanted to distill the 5 characteristics of people who'd finished well. He distilled them into 5, and one of them was they were on a mentoring journey. In other words, some was mentoring them and they mentoring someone else. So it was a flow through. It was one of those 5 of people who finished well. Really important. So someone who's got a good model of somebody mentoring them in their own life. You want to be a mentor who's got good boundaries. Enoch asked that question before. Good boundaries. It's got to have someone who's, can balance boundaries and margins. I'll talk a little bit more about margins another time. But who models a balanced life on their own. It's not someone who's running around the country helping everyone else, but their family's really struggling. That's not a good mentor. Not a good mentor. Might make them feel good because they're helping so many people, but it's not helping their key relationships very much at all. So it's got to be someone who's got that in their own balanced life. I said before, confidentiality and safety. That is absolutely paramount. My wife's had a situation many, many years ago now where she opened up to someone about something from her past, and it got spread. She heard it back from someone else. And for years she goes, I'm not going to trust anyone with any information, because it draws you up inside. And so if someone's not confidential, don't bother. It'll be all cursory. It'll be all sort of shallow, superficial stuff that you talk about. Be like Christian small talk. That's what it'll be. Humility is important. You are the support person for that person. You're not the main game. And sometimes for those of us who've been in some sort of significant Christian leadership and are used to having some profile or the main game, you've got to work hard to not be. It's not about you. It's not about you, what you do. It's about you are the support person for someone else. They are the one you want to support and you want to care for and you want to make a difference in. And the other thing is you need to be able to address hard issues. You don't walk away from tough stuff. And you need to be able to say, that's a toughie. I'm going to ask you a couple of tough questions about that, okay? Cool. Here goes. What got you into that in the first place? Tell me that. Tell me what it was that helped, that got you started on that. And, and tell me some of the things that it actually, impact your life with? Tell me those sorts of things. Don't shirk away from that, because that might be a real healing opportunity for someone. But you back off because it's tough stuff. It is tough stuff. So sometimes it's a balance between, I can't deal with that. That's too big. That needs professional help. But I need to sort of raise the issue that it might need professional help. It's kind of what you were saying before, Nathan, about how do you, there's a problem, an issue with someone, and how do you balance counselling? I've had to say to people, you should go to a doctor about that. You should see somebody other than me about that. I'm happy to walk with you. I'm happy to be part of the journey with you, but I cannot advise you on that. And you have to be free to say that. So it's, Letitia.
That about balancing, counselling or suggesting professional supervision. When it comes to being a mentor, what are some disciplines that you adhere to or discernment that you have around when you're dealing with an issue that there isn't enough lived experience here, or I don't know enough, and I'm not going to fake that space and mentor you on this when I don't have enough credibility or lived experience in that space?
That's a great question. How do you know when to back off when it's not, it's not up your alleyway? You can't. It's not in your wheelhouse, nor is it in your jurisdiction to fix that. And pardon me, I would always, this is going to sound trite, and I don't mean it to sound trite because it's really important. I would always pray on the way to mentoring someone, just on the way that day. Say, God, I need discernment, wisdom today. I want to see the best for this person. I need some. So that would be one, and I've got to trust that God's going to give me that. But I've got my antenna up all the time there's some things I cannot help you with. I can make some suggestions about your spiritual rhythms, how they're going, about your emotional well-being. How's that going? I can give you some insights or ask you some questions about those. Are you getting good sleep? Are you you're having some fun in your life? Because people don't have fun in their life. And are you getting some fun? That I can ask those sort of questions. But if it's coming down to a strong mental health issue, for example, or a medical issue, or something that needs, my antennas are up. I cannot, and I feel okay with saying, I can't help you with that. I'll walk with you through it. I'll walk with you every step of the way. But can I suggest that you go, or even I'm happy to go with you if it needs to be that. But I can't advise you. So I've actually got my antennas up, and I feel okay if I walk away thinking I couldn't help them through that problem. I feel okay about that because I've helped them. I've sort of given them a direction of where they can go, but I personally can't fix that up. And you have to be okay. One of the things that happens for us in Christian ministry, I think, not just in pastoral ministry, but ministry, is that we have the sense that we have to fix people. We have to fix a situation. And we can't fix it. The Holy Spirit is the fixer, if you like. And we can point people to that, and we can, but if you don't grab that, we're not going to be able to do it. So we have to get rid of the fixer mentality. And it's hard to do, particularly if you've been a fixer, a rescuer. Any other thoughts about other things you would want to look for in a mentor that I haven't mentioned? So I would say that we all need a mentor. Don't over spiritualize that. Don't over sort of heebie-jeebie mentor. It's just someone who will walk the journey with you of life and faith, and will be able to help you along the way. Maybe someone is a little bit further, but don't have to be miles further. A little bit further down the track in terms of Christian experience and maturity. Maybe someone like that. It may be a co-mentor. You get to my age, the people who are down the track are not there anymore. So some of them are, but so it can be a bit of a co-mentor thing. and stuff like that. So I didn't want to say dead. That was kind of, that's a bit too, but graduated. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. So do you know what I mean? So I think seek someone out. Now, don't make it a project, but asking God, say, God, would you reveal to me someone who might be good for me? But don't rush it. You know what I mean? Don't go, I've got to find someone by next week. But you might be surprised and you might be surprised at the people God brings into your life. In terms of, it might be someone not like you at all. They're not, you wouldn't be their best friend normally, but they'd be a great mentor. Okay? Yes, Graham.
This is more a statement rather than a question. Sometimes your best mentor may be a lot younger than you.
If we define mentor too tightly, that probably won't happen. But a mentor you can get mentored by books, authors, in a strange way. Now, I think you need a human mentor to work with you and touch at a human level, but you can. You can get mentored. You can have mentoring capacity by a whole bunch of people. Some are younger because they'll mentor you in some areas you'd never master, and you can be mentored by. There's some authors that I like to read more than other authors, and they actually impact me more than. So so there's that. But I still think you need a human being who's on a place where you can trust their journey. Yeah, it's certainly mature. You wouldn't want to be mentored by someone who you didn't believe was mature. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can look at people. Yeah, absolutely. Specific things. Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, it's whatever. Let me pray. Father, we want to thank you that there are some pragmatics to this whole area of our identity and security. And Lord, when we have that settled, the settledness of your Spirit dwelling within us, and the settledness of you, of living inside out now with our soul and our body being informed and transformed by your Spirit within, then we can take up this journey of mentoring in a much more healthy way than we'd ever do it otherwise. Father, I want to thank you for the way in this room there are people who build into the lives of other people. There are people here who may not even called it mentoring, but they just love people. And they built into the lives of other people. They've listened, they've asked questions, they've prayed for, they've encouraged. They've walked along the way, walked beside. I want to thank you for that. And Lord, I want to pray that if there are people here now just thinking, gee, I'd love someone to walk that journey with me, that you'll give them wisdom. You'll give them patience. You'll give them insights, Lord God, as to who that might be. Who might walk this journey of life and faith with me, and who would I feel confident to walk it with? Who would I be prepared to share the vulnerabilities of my life? Who would I be prepared to talk about the rhythms in my life that I have or don't have? God, would you just give wisdom and insight to people now, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's thank Tim. Awesome. Some amazing wisdom and insight. One of the things that we was hoping that Tim would do is I thought, gee, it'd be good to know how to coach people better, mentor people better. And I thought, rather than just learn that for myself, wouldn't it be better if we trained a bunch of mentors and coaches? So as much as I want you to encourage, to be encouraged about thinking about looking for a mentor, just be open that someone might ask you to be a mentor. as well, because the skills that you're learning, and whether or not you're appointed as a mentor, you don't need to have an intentional relationship, but it doesn't mean to say, hey, if there's someone similar age or a little bit younger, you're not saying, hey, I want to mentor you, but you might just say, hey, let's catch up for a coffee, and you can still start to just ask those questions that they may be not being asked by others. And so I guess I'd just love to thank Tim for that, because it's great, but put yourself intentionally in a place where you can be stretched. You know, that's what your mentor is going to do. You know, if he's just saying, stay where you are, you're good, then, you know, you're not growing. And all growth we're learning is in the uncomfortable zone. So if someone's going to ask you harder questions than the ones you're wrestling with at the moment, that's probably a good thing. You know, so they may not ask all the questions. You might need a couple of people that you're catching up with to mentor you in different areas, but it's really great. Thanks for that, Tim. So let's wrap up now, and we'll see you back at 6:30 is when the sessions start. We're going to try and start. We'll give you some time to get there from 5 past, 10 past 6, so that you can have some time for worship like we had this morning. I'm sure you thoroughly enjoyed that, and so if you can't make it till 6:30, then be there as soon as you can. But we'll spend some time in worship from about 6:15 onwards. So we'll see you then. Have a great afternoon.